Alright, so what we're going to be doing in this tutorial is a variation of a blue dun. The original had some, if I remember right, they have mallard wings coming off the top and back, and we're gonna skip that. We're gonna add some blue dun hen wings off of a hen neck. So what I have in the vise here is a TMC size 12 100, and my thread is Unithread 80 in Rusty Dun. So what we're going to do is we're going to start our thread about a bodkin width behind the eye, and I always like to check that because this is where our head's going to go for the fly. So we want to make sure we leave that room and don't crowd that too much. And next I'm going to go probably about halfway, wrapping back with nice tight touching turns. If I can find my scissors, there we go. And we can trim off the tag. Excuse me, the tag. And we're going to continue that process of just nice tight touching turns until we get back just past the hook point, and maybe not quite to the barb. So next what we need is some tailing material. And for this fly we're going to use some dark dun. I've got this dark dun feather here. You can get dark dun from all kinds of lengths. You could use black saddle hackle if you needed to, or something like that. So you got some options, but basically what we're looking for is some nice straight, somewhat stiff barbs coming off the side, and when we kind of pull them up like so, we want them to be, if possible, past the well greater distance than the shank of the hook. And I don't like those down there. I think they're a little wonky. I'll take those off. So when I'm actually picking out the tailing material, try to do your best. I know it can get a little tough with getting proper size tail, but pull it out to the side, kind of like so, and stroke it out and line it up a little bit. And right here I've got probably just shy of a 1/4 inch. Sorry, I went out of camera there, but I've probably got just short of a 1/4 inch there. And so usually that works for me. A lot of the times you'll end up taking off 1 or 2 anyway, or they split on you like that, and you got to align them, and one of them goes wonky. So you're better off going a little heavy than a little light. So once I have my tail material, we need to get a distance, and the way we're going to do that is I'm going to take, just don't like that one, there we go, that's a little better. It's popping out on me a little. Okay, we're just going to get rid of it. So I'm going to take my, I'm going to pinch this between my right thumb and right index, and I'm going to get a distance. I'm going to go from the front of the hook eye, and I want this tail to come just to the bend. You can go as short as the thread. And you can go a little shorter if you need to. If you go shorter, load up a little more material. So I'm going to pinch there. I'm going to transfer the distance, right? So I've got my distance here that I want. I'm just going to pinch with my left thumb, left index. And I'm going to bring a loose wrap over the top. I'm going to start to pull up with tension as I come up the back side. I'm going to place one more tight wrap over. And that wrap you want going towards the front. And there you go, we got a little tail in there. And now we can just simply start wrapping this guy forward, tight touching turns. For some dry flies it will matter where you keep your tailing material. For dub body ones, the nicer you make them, the more symmetrical that you make them, say like keeping your tailing material on top of the hook shank as opposed to letting it roll, the nicer the fly is going to turn out. But if these start to roll on you, don't worry about it. You can just kind of do this number to them and just keep them on top of the hook shank. And if they move around the hook shank a little bit, don't freak out. It's not a big deal. So once I have it wrapped up about halfway, I'm going to come in with my scissors and kind of lift these guys up. And what I want I know it's a little hard for me to show you this. I'm going to change the light a little bit. I'm going to kind of pull up, and I'm going to trim at an angle so that the final part of these tips that we just cut off are going to come up all the way to basically where we're going to tie in the wings. And we're going to get to that in just a second. It's kind of 6 of one or half dozen of the other, telling you which one to do first. So now that I've tied those in, the distance I'm looking to have for my wing placement is about 2 bodkin widths. So I take my bodkin from behind the eye and move it back, and you'll start to be able to gauge whether or not you have enough distance. I always rely on my bodkin to do this to make sure that I'm just kind of right in that sweet spot. So anyway, that's food for thought. So what we're going to do is we're going to put in our wings. I know a lot of the times on dry flies you put the wings in first, then do the tail. I chose to do the tail first because on a lot of these tailing fibers, if you don't have the correct tailing fiber or the length of it that you really need to run it the gamut all the way up and kind of place it between the wings, which is what I like to do to keep that body symmetrical, just to make a nice looking fly. You're going to have to make some. You're going to have to build up some ground in here, and I have found that it's easier to build up ground with adding, excuse me, with using the stems off of the wings that we're getting ready to place. So I'll kind of come in here and you can kind of see I'm playing around a little bit, and that's what I'm looking to do is find a couple of these feathers that are about the same. Usually they come very close together off the neck. And those will work if I can get them out. Nope, I pulled an extra. Actually, I pulled 2 extras. So anyway, we're going to have some feather tips that look like this. In my opinion, the hen necks in particular make much nicer dry fly wings because they just kind of look like that. When you get the, like a saddle off a rooster or a neck off a rooster, more often than not, you're going to get these tips that are very pointy, and they can be a real pain to tie in, and you're going to run out of them real fast. So what we want to do is take these feathers and put them with the convex side touching each other and go stem to stem, and we want to line these tips up so that we have kind of an even distance, and don't be afraid to maneuver one a little bit here and there, shift them around. But we want this part even, so if I were to put a flat surface against this, we want those as even as possible. Okay, now what we need is a distance, or actually you could say a height for our wings, and we're going to use the shank to determine that. So these wings, when they're tip to tip like so, and they're lined up against the back side of the eye of the hook, we want to start pulling barbulets back at about the position of the barb. And so what I can do is I'll take these, I'll line them up, I'll pinch them with my right thumb, right index, and I will start to pull these feathers back, or these barbulets back, to get some bare stem action going on right at the distance that I'm looking for. And it takes a minute. Yeah, so that's just about right. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take them and place them on top of the hook shank. I'm going to do a loose turnover, pull up the back side, and come around. I'm going to position the wings where I want them, up top, and you'll know if you have it in the right spot if you kind of have this mohawk look, right? That's what you want to kind of do, is have this mohawk look that kind of breaks the center of the eye if you twist your vise, or if you have to get on top and look at it. Then I'm going to take my left thumb, left index, I'm going to draw these barbulets back, and I'm going to slowly start wrapping back, and I'm going to take my thread to about the 3rd position, which I think I'm going to go 1 more, maybe 2 more. And so when I lift it up like this, I can see that I've got that nice smooth spot right here. And that's important because that's where we're going to add our hackle. Then I'll come in with my fingernail clippers and trim those away. And if you got a little bit of stuff that's hanging off the back, you know, you can kind of trim it down, or you can cut it completely clean if you want. The cleaner you cut this, the better the body of the fly is going to turn out usually, okay? You can always overcompensate with dubbing, but you know, it's how many times you want to start overcompensating for something that can just be kind of taken care of in the beginning. And for me, the answer is not very often. So anyway, now I'm going to start wrapping my thread back. Plus, it kind of helps build a little taper. So you'll see that this section right here is kind of nice and smooth, and then we have a little hump, and then it's going to start tapering to the back. And you can kind of build the taper up as you go if you need to. Kind of just going forward and back, forward and back. Don't get too crazy with it. Okay. Now, once we get to the back, what I normally will do is I'll lick my fingers and grab those tail fibers, pull them straight up and off the back, sneak my thread down and around the back side, pull it. See how I'm pulling it down? I'm pulling it down to my lower right, and I'm pulling that tail up to the upper left. Now I can lay that tail flat, and hold it in place. One nice tight wrap over. And gotta play with it a little bit. Now they're still wet, they'll dry out. There we go. Something like so. Okay, might be a little light on my tail on this one, but that's okay. Next, what we need to do is get some Adams Gray dubbing. I'm using Adams Gray Superfine, and I will take the dubbing, I will pinch some off, and what we really want to do to make our dubbing job nicer and a little easier is do the work up front. So I'm going to take it and kind of pinch it and pull it, reset it and lay it, so that all the fibers are going the same direction, and that I've got about the same amount. So it's really tough to describe it, but it's just takes some playing with, and you'll kind of figure it out. Next, I'm going to put it to the thread. I'm going to start to noodle it on, dub it on, and we want a really thin layer of dubbing. See, so what we did was we kind of already built the taper of the body with our thread and the materials that we've already used. Okay, so when you do that, and you don't have to make up for lumps and bumps in there, you want to keep that dubbing noodle somewhat thin and maybe just ever so increasing towards the front. The next thing I want to show you is leaving all this stuff off the back that has not been dubbed on yet. You want to make sure you do that with pretty much any dubbing that you have. If you need to take this off, it makes it easier. If you need to add more, you can combine it pretty much seamlessly. So that's why you see that back there. And next we want to just keep wrapping it forward. And if you need to twist it up every turn or so, do that. Try not to go back on to the dubbing too much itself. If you do, use like a crisscross, one to the back, one to the front, one to the back, or one to the front kind of thing. But it's better to, at least in my view, to kind of get that body where you want it, or the underbody where you want it before you do this. It makes for a nicer fly. So now we're going to bring our thread to the 3rd position, like you see here. So I've still got about a bodkin or a bodkin and a half width between that. I'm going to grab my bobbin, and now I'm just going to slide and pull that dubbing off right there. I'm going to add one wrap. I'm going to leave this dubbing hanging out the back, and I'll show you why in a minute. And now I need a hackle, and I thought I had one, but apparently I did not. So we'll just get one real quick. No big deal. So next what we need is a dark dun hackle. It needs to match the tail. And all this stuff towards the bottom isn't very good. You can use this for tails too, absolutely, if they're long enough. But like on something like this fly, you know, it's literally the length of the body. You're going to be tying it off right next to the stem. It just doesn't make for great tailing material. Maybe if you get down to 18s and stuff. This is a 12. So anyway, so I'm going to do the same thing, kind of get all that wonkiness out of the feather. I'll cut the back end of this off. Maybe I can use it for something else. Maybe I can't. Then I'll pull these fibers out like so. And I'm going to take off a 1/4 inch or so of those fibers. We're going to do this twice, except the first time we want this to be even. The second time you need to distinguish which way you're going to wrap this. You're going to wrap this shiny side forward or dull side forward. So this would be the shiny side, blah. This would be the dull side. You could also say convex and concave because that's how most feathers work. So anyway, I'm going to do it with the convex side facing forward or the shiny side. I'm going to go ahead and take, on my right side, take some more off. I do that because this is the way that I'm going to wrap this stem. I'm going to put it up against the hook shank like this, and it's going to wrap to the back. So now I have bare stem touching my tie-in point, and as I start to work up with a wrap or two, you're going to get a much straighter and neater and cleaner job in the back if you do it this way. At least in my experience. So now we're going to take that feather and we're going to slide that down so it's just barely above. Okay, we're going to come over the top right down to the lower left, add some pressure, come up from the back left to the lower front right, making kind of a figure 8 pattern. We're going to do that twice. And I'm going to bring my thread to the back. Now, you'll notice how there's a little gap here between the stem and where I left my dubbing. Now I can bring that dubbing down. Go the other way. There we go. Now I can redub. You can redub my my thread with what I had left over, so I don't have to redub. And now I can fill in that gap. Finish off the taper if I need to. Fill in the gap. I can also pull that little bit off and trim it away if I need to. Okay. Now what I'll do is I'll take my thread, come underneath the back left side, or the bottom back left side of that hackle. And you can see how I've got that stem. You can see it moving as I do this. I'm going to catch that and make one nice turn. Now, one thing I found that's really important here when you're doing this is to make sure that you get that stem kind of locked into a position. I can't honestly say that I've found one position to be better than the other, but if you're going to tie it in on the bottom and make it run the bottom, make it run the bottom. And I like that position better because I just think it's a little easier to come in like this, and I'm gonna trim that out right below my wings, like so. So I still have a little stem left, and as I bring my thread forward, that gets trapped under my wings quite nicely. I can jump my thread forward, put a few wraps in right behind the wings. So you should have something that looks similar to that. I know my tail's a little high, but it is what it is. Next, you can go ahead and start kind of gently pulling these wings apart so that you have something that looks similar to that. Okay, we want to get these wings to stay in an upright position and divided. So I'm going to bring my thread from the, and you can do this, you can make this figure 8 loop in numerous ways. My thread just happens to be in position at this point where it's easier to come from the back left over the top up, down to the, oh, I'm catching something there. I'm catching something and I don't like it. There we go. Down to the front right. Come up underneath, and then from the upper front right to the back left. Pull those wings up. And now we're going to place a few really nice wraps, edging ever so slowly towards the eye. Your thread needs to stop, or at least in my case, what I prefer to do is about a bodkin width behind the eye, so we have room to build our head. We have our wings in place. Now these wings are going to move, so if you prefer them not to move on you, which is understandable, you can actually take some UV resin and put a little dab between the wings right here, or a little super glue or head cement or whatever you're using. Excuse me. Just make sure that you give it adequate time to dry. Now, I'm going to move those forward just a little bit. I'm going to wrap over. Well, I got something in the way there. There we go. So now I've got my bare part of the stem making my first wrap and a half or so. Yeah, it wants to turn on me. Some stems will do that to you. All right. There we go. We're just going to slowly wrap forward. I like to say here, tight is right. We'll move the wings back, jump that to the front. And just grab that hackle and gently pull it to the back. Each time we do this, and get one more in. Okay. Now, as I do with most of my other hackle, I'll pull it towards me just because I can see it better. I'll pull it towards me like so. I'll bring my thread up from the upper back, as we're coming over the back side, upper back right. And as I bring it over, I'm going to start stretching this guy forward. And what that does is it helps get these barbulets that are still attached to this hackle out of the way, at least most of them. And I'm going to make 2 wraps that way. I'm going to reverse this hackle to the back, make 2 wraps to the front, hopefully not catching those fibers. There we go. There we go. Take your time doing that, because I'll see I even still trapped one there. That's all right. So I'm going to do 2 to the back with the feather going forward like this. I'm going to do 2 or 3 on the front with the feather coming to the back. I'm going to move the feather back forward. And now I'm going to finish placing some very nice hackle or thread wraps on that hackle so we can get it nice and divided. This is where a lot of people get stuck with their heads. See, I've got the whole hook eye exposed. My hackle's clean, it's out of the way. So really take your time with this part. Don't rush it and crowd that hook eye when you can't get nothing in there. You can't attach it to anything. Now I'm going to come in. I usually use my fingernail clippers, but my hackle moved, the feather moved to the bottom side, and I can't get them in there. So we'll come in and trim that out. And before I go any further, I kind of groom it if I got stuff that's up front, because we don't want to just keep trapping these barbs that are trapped. You kind of want those out of there. There we go. Now I'm going to draw everything to the back. Oops, sorry. I think it blurred on you there. I'm going to jump my thread to the front. Nice tight turns to the back. I'll jump it to the front, right behind the eye, wrap my thread to the back. Now don't go too far back or you're going to push it into the wing and it's going to stay in that position. Where I have it now, I can still bring it forward. And there it is, my whip finish. Yeah, 4 or 5 in there. Now with most of my dry flies, I actually use cuticle clippers to trim that thread. And also, before you move all that hackle forward, this is the time I like to add my adhesive for the head, especially if you're using like super glue and stuff. But here I'm just using some Solarez. And you just kind of dab it on a little bit. Okay. And then also, ooh, do I have some? I'll just use this hackle. It's cool. Oh. Maybe. Actually, so then what I'll do is I'll take a hackle, and I do this with all my glues. Get through there. So I'll take a feather and run it through the eye, or a peacock herl. Clean that stuff out. Give it the old zap. If you're using other kind of adhesives, obviously you're going to skip that step, but you're going to want to move this into position as quickly as possible. Before you give it the final torch. I got something stuck there. There we go. Yeah, it bent on me a little bit. Now my tail's a little wonky. It happens. So if it happens to you, don't stress it. It's not a big deal. It'll still fish. So anyway, there you go. There's a nice, easy beginner's version of Blue Dun variant. If you liked the video, subscribe, share. You can also join us at Fly Tying for Beginners at Facebook. And as always, happy tying.